Some warm welcome again to Inner Fitness. Our topic today is progressions. So as usual, we're going to start with a reflection. I'm hoping everyone can hear okay. We'll start with a reflection and maybe we'll go back to our little, so that it's more pleasant for you. So sitting comfortably, you can experiment with eyes open and feel free to take a moment or two to let the body settle, relax into the space while still remaining engaged, alert. And sometimes just a breath or two can help to do that. Doesn't need to be a big or forced breath, but just mindful of the breath, taking that breath in and a slow release of the air, the exhale, drawing my attention to any tension that might be in the body and helping it to release. Another breath in and the slow exhale, giving me the experience of slowing down in general. And then letting the breath continue naturally, automatically on its own. And now that my attention is focused, I shift it from the breath of the body upwards, inwards, behind the forehead, to my own inner world. And the power of my inner world. This is the place of thoughts, feelings, memories, experiences, attitudes, perspectives, perceptions, decision-making. It's quite a powerful place. There is incredible impact on the outer world from what's going on in my inner world. So it's quite important to give attention to the state of my inner world, sometimes called my inner kingdom. Is that inner kingdom, my inner world, is it ordered, peaceful, calm, uncluttered, filled with ease, no battling? Or is it chaotic, cluttered, incoherent, a laborious place to be? Do I enjoy spending time in the space of my inner world? And if I want to enhance the state of that inner world, introduce more peace, more wisdom, more power, more honesty, how do I go about that? Is it through violence? Or is it through love? Do I have a plan, a path, a method? Or is it hit and miss? How do I care for this powerful, wonderful, and sometimes mysterious space called my inner world, my inner kingdom? Om Shanti. So the fitness of my inner world, so we say inner fitness. I've always liked this term, benefitness, the capacity to benefit the self. How do I improve the fitness of my inner world given its power over my experience of life, quality of life? So we always like to start looking at the outer example. It's something that we can feel is more concrete at times. And this idea of progressions. So in any outer or physical endeavor, this idea of improving my capacity with that endeavor through progression. So what exactly is this idea of progressions? It's nice, it has the word progress in it, but what exactly does it mean, progressions? Any idea? What are progressions? And why on earth would I want to go at anything with progression? Steps. Right, steps towards that objective. Very good.
Sustainable progress.
So it's going to help it to be sustainable. Whatever progress I'm experiencing, it will help it to be sustainable. So that's under the why. Growth. Method or process for growth. Very nice. You did. What are progressions and why? Why would I want to use them or honor them or observe them?
It's progress according to where you're at.
So it's acknowledging your starting point. So progressions acknowledge your starting point. Any other thoughts on progressions?
It's accessible.
It makes it accessible because the entry point is relevant. Better than start. Oh, sorry. Let me actually read the full thing. So it's better than starting point. And in physical fitness, mastery of the fundamentals of an exercise. Yes. I find this item. Oh, it's a self-report card. So self-assessment is included in this idea of progressions. I find this idea of progressions quite relevant at this time because everyone's life has been changing quite a bit. And that's an understatement I respect over the last few months. And, you know, whatever we might have been doing at a certain level, you know, over a year ago, it might have changed along the way. And so in our mind, we're still here. In our mind, we still are at this state of operating, but things might have changed. And so when I try to engage in that activity again, am I actually acknowledging where I am right now and operating from that place? So progressions is very, very connected. And I know this moving forward towards the set goal. Thank you, because that's what we're just going to share, is that it's very connected to this idea of having an objective. So I have an objective, and yes, I'm at a starting point. So this idea of going from point A to point B, I just find that phrase alone. I know it's English, but perhaps other languages have it, from point A to point B, because in Raj Yoga, we have two terms that we use, which connect with aim and objective. and they are alpha and beta. Alpha is A and beta is B. B represents my objective, where I want to get to, and alpha is the method to reach that objective. So from A to B, I want to get from A to B, and in my mind, I'm so enamored with the objective, so enamored that in my heart, I just want to be there yesterday. I want to be at that objective yesterday. So we see this kind of interesting approach, and yes, it's not sustainable very often and almost prone to injury as well. We see this approach quite often New Year's Day, in the month of January. Guess what happens in the month of January? It's a very exciting month.
Membership signups increase.
Yes, resolutions happen and membership businesses make a lot of money. It's what party. No, that's New Year's Eve, Richard. That's New Year's Eve. New Year's Day. So as we go into January, it's like, I'm going to lose all the weight, or I'm going to stop smoking, or I'm going to just become, not that I am picking on any particular soul, but Arnold Schwarzenegger. I have a vision. I have a vision, an objective, and I am so enthusiastic. So I'm going to lose 40 pounds in one day. Yeah. It's never been done before, but I'm going to do it. So we start to see these crazy activity. And it's always a little bit frightening in the fitness industry, definitely, because we have souls coming into the space who might be their very first time in that kind of environment with that kind of equipment. And they just, sort of see fit people around them and what they're doing. They say, I'm going to do the same thing. And you can imagine how exciting that is. So we start to see some injuries. I know Emma has a little bit of experience around that. We start to see some, because I don't have an understanding of what is actually going on, right? So I'm just so enamored with the objective, and I just go straight at it directly. And at best, I just run out of steam. At worst, I can actually do quite a bit of damage to myself. So this idea that it's wonderful to have an objective, a vision, and it's always very important to check what is the basis of that objective. And we often talk about goals or visions or objectives that are inspired by, if you will, a lack of self-respect. So those I want to be obviously very cautious about. I really want to check what is inspiring my objective. Is it self-respect or a lack of self-respect? In fact, the pursuit of self-respect itself is a wonderful objective, and is the objective in Raj Yoga, is the pursuit of self-respect, securing or restoring self-respect. That alone is a wonderful objective. Then once I've got self-respect, I'm home free. Any other objectives I set, I know are going to be actually very beneficial for the self and others, because they're driven from self-respect. So it's really nice to get that objective clarified. So I have to check, is my objective a healthy one? Is it being inspired by self-respect, or is it driven by ego, insecurity, so comparing, competing, greed, attachment, fear? What actually is driving that objective? So as you are sitting here right now, thinking about perhaps different objectives in your life, can you tell what's driving those objectives? And I always find this one of the most powerful exercises. It's, I suppose, a meditation, but to be very clear and honest, what is driving my objective? It's amazing how far along we can go towards something that's driven from a very unhealthy place. Will it catch up with us? Yeah. Thank goodness it does. That we can, there's a safety, a safeguard in drama that doesn't allow us to do damage to ourselves forever, but eventually it's blocked. But can you think of instances inside where you are pursuing an objective that is not coming from a place of self-respect? I know it's an odd thing to reflect on, so we won't spend long there. But perhaps realizing how important it is to check the basis of my objectives. So that's really important. Objectives, very, very important, but always making sure they're shaped, they're informed, they're driven from a healthy place. So great, I have this objective. Now I need some kind of path or understanding that acknowledges my entry point. And I really, really appreciate that this is an aspect of a robust or healthy practice of any kind, spiritual or otherwise, because yes, it will be sustainable and there won't be that violence. There's actually sort of a possibility of success because I have a method that is quite relevant. So we want to have something that acknowledges my entry point, that is very much connected to my objective. So I know for me, these are one of the first exercises I did when I came into the spiritual study, is I clarified what my objective was. As it turned out, it was self-respect. So I clarified what the objective was. And I asked, does this study of Raj Yoga have anything to do with my objective? Because if it doesn't, then there's no point. It must be something else that's driving me to do Raj Yoga. So sometimes we're like lemmings and we see other people doing something. So, oh, everybody's doing Hatha Yoga. I think I will too. I have met people and they make me laugh. I love them, bless their hearts. They'll come up and say, yoga is dangerous for you. Hatha yoga. They're talking about Hatha yoga is dangerous for you. I get injured when I do it. And I really appreciate what they're saying, because everywhere you go, everyone's saying Hatha yoga is very good for you. Very, very good for you. And they're saying, that wasn't my experience. There's a lot of injuries out there to have. So we want to make sure that it's actually relevant to my objective, the path. That's important. And we also want to make sure that the practice I am choosing for my objective acknowledges my starting point, that it's not just, going to set me up for a lack of success. And I've always really respected, I sort of watch through the corner of my eye so I don't appear to be staring, but personal trainers working with clients who are masters of progression. They're extremely creative, very aware, very respectful. And even though the trainer themselves might be operating at this extremely advanced state, they have this understanding, really, of how they got there, this understanding that they can be a bridge for someone to reach their full potential, which may not be even the same as the trainer, but knows the entry point. And they're so creative at acknowledging where people are coming from. So is the path I've chosen relevant to my objective? Is my objective healthy? Is the path I've chosen relative? And does it acknowledge my starting point? Is it nonviolent? So this idea of progressions, and I know that it was mentioned at some point over here, this idea of the fundamentals. In this case, it was of the exercise of fitness. Now, it was funny yesterday because I was meeting, and this is pretty classic for what we're seeing a lot right now, meeting one-on-one with a client. And this client has a history of being actually quite fit. But, during the current times, they're not really able to engage in the same quality of exercise they had been prior to the last several months. So their fitness levels have changed. And so we're sitting here, I'm very aware of where they're kind of at, what injuries they might be dealing with, etc. I'm also aware of what fitness level they have been at, what they have demonstrated, but I'm aware where they are now. And so we're sitting here in this training session, which happened to be outside in the parking lot because it has to be. So we're in this training session, and it literally was just the very, very basics of movement. Spending lots of time on the squat, lots of time on the lunge, breaking it down, removing gravity. And so at the end of it, and I'm always checking in and at the end of it, I said, "How are you?" He says, "I feel like I'm in kindergarten." And he looked a little bit, "I know I have to do it this way, but I feel like I'm in kindergarten." And, it's such an interesting thing to wrap your head. Now, number one, and this is why I really have to be careful about my objective, number one that interferes, what do you think is the top thing, top of the list, that interferes with someone being comfortable moving through progressions? What do you think is the top thing to interfere? I got a response over here even before the question was done, which I would agree with the response that I received. But before we share it, what do you think is the top thing to interfere with honoring progressions, being comfortable? Interesting. Thoughts of failure. Interesting. Yeah, it could certainly go on that side too.
I want it now. I don't need progressions.
No, because I have a lot of ego. So laziness. So I'm getting them on both sides, that I don't even bother to start because I'm worried about failing, or there's laziness, which are actually both functions of ego as well. Racing thoughts. I'm not able to stick to the progressions because I'm not really paying attention. And actually we'll come back to that because that's very interesting, Sangeeta. But then on the other side, I don't even bother. I just want to race ahead to the advance because of ego. I don't need to do progressions.
Perhaps it's a part of the thoughts of failures, comparing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are all coming from the same thing, ego. They all are coming from the same thing, the same place. This idea of, I remember there was, this happens really, really frequently in dance. Because usually what happens in a dance class, lack of self-trust, also under the ego piece, is that you're going to go into the class, and it's usually, a 90-minute class. So about half of that, believe it or not, is warm-up, warming the body up, doing a bunch of different things to warm the body up. Now that's really interesting. That's a high ratio of the time. The classic fitness class spends maybe 5, maybe 10% warming up, even less cooling down. Very different from a dance class. So almost 50% of the class time is spent doing warming up exercises. And the other 50% of the class time, you're going to learn a routine. And usually what happens is after the warm up and everything, so your body's really, really ready. So even progressing within the class, progressing to the point of big range of motion, the class is designed to progress to that point so no one gets injured. So even at that point, usually what happens is unless they are, and there are teachers like this who are just crazy gifted, and they can choreograph on the fly. They do not need to prepare the choreography before class starts. They literally can choreograph on the fly. And, I've been with choreography, and it's like, I'm like, I wish my brain could work. But most have the choreography set. So what they'll do is they will show you the whole dance that you are supposed to learn in 45 minutes, even less than that, because you need to execute it a few times. So you're about to learn a whole dance routine in a very short period of time, and they will show you the dance that you're going to learn before they even start, as they call it, breaking it down. They'll show you the whole dance. And I mean, once you've done a few classes, then you're fine. But I'm sure for people, they want to go talk about thoughts of failure. They want to go screaming from the room because you're looking at this dance that you're supposed to know. It's like, oh my gosh, how's that going to happen? How on earth is that going to happen? You know, you're like, this is crazy what I'm supposed to learn in this small amount of time. So there can be all those things you've identified, the lack of self-trust, the thoughts of failure, all of this, you know, ego kind of gets very excited because it doesn't want to look like an idiot. And it's unfortunate because I'm there out of a love for dance. It really doesn't matter. It's all a learning opportunity. Even it's not about the final execution of the dance. It's about learning movement the whole time. So I need to remember, oh yeah, that's why I came into this dance class, because I love to move and I just want to keep learning about movement. That's why I'm here. But ego will confuse my objective. Says, no, you're here to be like the best dancer on the planet, let alone in this room, but you gotta be amazing. And that really creates absolute havoc. And I miss the opportunity of that class. So really always staying connected to my objective. But what's fascinating is after you see the whole dance that looks completely overwhelming, the instructor, and I always find this magical, the instructor starts to break the routine up into 8, 16 or 8 count chunks. So you're going to learn the dance chunk by chunk. You learn a chunk, and they will break the chunk down even further. They'll say, this is what the legs do. This is what the arms do. This is the count. So they're really breaking it down, as they call it, breaking it down, creating this progression towards that final product. So breaking it down and giving what we call options. This is huge in the concept of progressions, is that it doesn't just acknowledge the path towards the objective, but it also acknowledges that you're working with a variety. We all need to do certain things, but also acknowledging, what am I able to do at this point? And there's a lot of pieces that come into this. We've talked about it so many times. Top of the list is following directions, which we're very bad at when ego is involved. Super bad. It's just remarkable. I mean, I don't mean to depress us all, but wow. If they could give out awards for not following direction, they'd have to have a lot of awards, is all I can say. So to really be able to listen to what's being said, also relative to what I am capable of at this time, that honesty. So the instructor might say, okay, at this point, there's a triple pirouette in the choreography, which means 3 turns on 1 foot, a triple pirouette. However, you're welcome to do a single pirouette or a double pirouette or just a releve. You're welcome. So then I have to find out what actually enables me to grow, but is not unsafe. I really have to be aware of where I'm at, very honest, not be lazy. You know, and this is one of the top things that we have to say with progressions is, here's the different possibilities. You have to sort out what is a challenge for me, what enables me to grow, but does not cause me damage. And if I'm lazy or I fear failure, I'm going to fall on one side of that. And if there's a lot of arrogance or lack of clarity, a lot of self-deception, I'm going to fall on the other side of that. So it requires incredible honesty and listening to be able to really use progressions properly. And so they break things down And it's an absolute wonder. It's an absolute wonder how at the end of it, you're doing this choreography that, if, 3/4 of an hour earlier, you're like, there's no way, because of this incredible capacity a really good teacher has of being able to break things down and acknowledge the different possibilities in the room. So when I come into a spiritual practice, I will say for myself, out of all endeavors on this planet, spiritual study, a spiritual journey, is by far the most challenging. By far the most challenging thing. Many people avoid it. Ego does not allow it to happen. It is by far the most challenging thing I think a human being can engage in. Some days I joke and say, it'd be easier if I just go lift 300 pounds in the weight floor, which I can't do, but it would be easier. It is a fascinating, it is by far the most rewarding thing one can do with themselves, but it is going to be the most challenging thing. And that's not to frighten you, but it really, what we're talking about ideally is the pursuit of our true self. Now, if I'm pursuing my true self, it means I'm not there. That's where I want to get to. And so there's going to be lots of what we call obstacles, resistance along the way. And it's all going to happen internally. But the resistance disguises itself to try to make me think it's external. It's a very interesting thing to work with when I keep getting confused about what exactly is the resistance. It's constantly throwing my attention somewhere else. So I need to have this path that acknowledges what's going to come up along the way, but also moves me to this quite incredible state in a very thoughtful, non-violent way with these progressions, these steps. And I know that some of us now are involved in a series that's all about taking 31 steps towards self-mastery. So this idea of these progressions, and progressions ideally are built one on top of the other. So I need to master this one. So this is back to the fundamentals Pauline was talking about. I need to master this level before I pass go. Until I master this one, I might think, okay, I'm ready to go on to this, and I'm ready to go, but I haven't really mastered or set the foundation. Now, if I was building a house, there's no way I could really move on without getting the basement kind of laid down and properly in place. I don't get to, I'm not going to go and build the second floor without basement, first floor, second. Like it's kind of got to go that way. But it's amazing, again, how much deception comes in when you're dealing with something this incognito as a spiritual study. That's what actually makes it so challenging, is it's quite incognito aspects that have very, very overt impact in my life. So first, getting that foundation, this is sort of the first step, is getting that foundation laid out. And when it comes to Raj Yoga, the foundation that has to be mastered before I pass go is having a deep experience to the question, who am I? Having a deep experience of the answer, who am I? And we say the answer in Raj Yoga is, I am a soul, a spiritual being, an eternal traveler through time. Nothing of this physical realm is really ever mine, because I'm still traveling and it's left behind. So nothing ever really is mine. This is what happens when something that is timeless interfaces with something that is temporal. They can't travel together. So nothing really is mine. I'm entrusted with things for a short period of time, but inevitably, not maybe, but definitely, I will have to let go. So this is why spirituality is so fascinating, because it has this concept of letting go, detaching. Detaching doesn't mean I don't care. It's got nothing to do with it. It's having the strength to let go, which inevitably has to happen. Everything of the temporal realm changes. So this is the essence. I want to really understand this basic idea of who I am. So I want you to just imagine in your mind, if I don't get step one, if I don't really master it, what do you think the next steps will look like, which have to do next with connecting to God and then starting to inculcate certain virtues in my life? What will those look like if I don't have lesson one under my belt? What will my, say, relationship with God look like if I don't know who I am?
I think it's kind of a layered thing. So I'm kind of hesitating to share about like who I am. If that's distorted, then who's to say I won't be distorting everything else I see?
Yeah, let's, as an example, the idea that I think who I am is this physical body. So how will that determine how I see others? And how will that determine how I see God? We can simply look at our past to know the answer to that. Because we have thought we're our bodies, and it shows how we see others as their bodies, and that's gotten us into massive trouble. Massive trouble. Thinking that people are their physical body. We have long history in every country of severe trauma due to seeing others as their body. It gets us into big trouble. And then I don't know what we do with God. I mean, if we think that we have this wonderful phrase that we're all created in the image of God. Well, what does that look like? I mean, I know you all have your videos off, but I can see Nora there, and her image is very different from mine if we think we are the physical body. So I don't know, is God like a hybrid? Kind of half Asian, half Afro-American. I mean, how does this work exactly? Is he kind of female, male? I mean, well, what's going on? It kind of all falls apart. Kind of all falls apart. And then, of course, with the idea of virtues, we start to get very cultural. If we think we're our body and the culture that we're born, in my culture, this is how we do, this is how we show love. But in my culture, this is how we show love. I remember I've shared this story before, but it's back to the gap between the teeth. Which I should, it wasn't there. I don't know what, it's after the braces. Anyways, it doesn't matter. So for very long, because in the culture in which I found myself, there were very clear ideas about beauty. And it was all physically based. Very clear ideas about beauty. And this, in the culture I found myself, was considered unsightly. So I'd get, and I'm not saying this, I'm trying to make a point that we run into trouble when we go at our sense of self in a very limited way. So very long, people would often say, you can get this fixed, and I get that a lot. And then one day I ran into someone from a different culture, and they were again commenting, and they said, where they come from, this is a beauty mark. And that's when I started to think, whoa, this is really crazy. I mean, it's so dependent. When I go to India, it's fascinating. They think I must be on the verge of dying because there's freckles on the face, and this kind of discoloration of the skin is usually a sign of malnourishment. And so it's like, oh my gosh. And then I'm not, physically big enough. Like, you must be very unhealthy. So it's all very, very, if we go by who am I as a cultural or a physical or a gender, any of these limited things, we run into trouble. It affects how we relate to other people. It affects how we relate to situations, our understanding of virtues, and it definitely affects our relationship with God if we even are interested in it. So without mastering that first step, all the other steps won't actually lead me to my objective. They keep circling back to where I was. And you see this in fitness. It's remarkable. It takes incredible mindfulness, attention for souls to master the first step when it's different from old habits. Just to get that first step, I'll see someone, they're doing push-ups, they have an old habit, an old way of doing push-up, and we say, okay, the first thing they want to do is just go at it. That's already a problem. Just like we just want to go at being nice and being kind, and we just do the old stuff, right? So we always have to say, okay, slow down, slow everything down. Let's just, before we add any movement, let's just make sure our foundation is accurate. Because they go into it and they have their old alignment, and you have to literally talk them through, and they get this kind of meditative introverted state. Even though they're doing something physical, the same principle is applying, which is called awareness. In this case, it's body awareness. In spirituality, it's self-awareness. But this first thing that has to happen, awareness. And they just get this focused energy to them. I always find it quite fascinating. It feels like, oh, they're meditating. It's the exact same energy when they're trying to be aware, especially when they're overriding old habits. They go into that plank, they have the old alignment. We have to take some time just to master the first step before they do anything else, because if they do it in their old alignment, it will be the old stuff. Everything will be the same as it was before. But in their mind, they think they're doing something new, right? But actually, they're not. They're doing the same old thing. So in spirituality, we're always asked, okay, what's that first step that everything else will depend on if I don't master? And I'll just conclude by saying that it was so refreshing to have the example in front of us in this practice with the Brahma Kumaris of the first students, the very first student who came to be known as Brahma Baba. Profound respect for this soul, because yes, he was extremely experienced in a worldly way. He was a very successful businessman, very well liked, very adept at interacting with the community, with all different economic brackets. I mean, it goes on and on. Very, very experienced soul. And then he came into the study, and his objective was to restore a level of personal dignity that was considered inaccessible before. He suddenly really felt, no, I feel that we are capable as human beings of this very high level of personal dignity. And so he was very enamored. He felt it was essential that he would only be really at peace with his life if he had at least endeavored to reach that level of personal dignity and provide opportunities for others to do the same. So, he comes in with incredible experience, worldly wisdom. And the first thing that we really notice is this incredible humility. Almost like he's like, I need to learn how to walk, spiritually speaking. This incredible, very basic, very humble, not particularly clever, even though he is quite brilliant, but not really clever, just very simple, very basic approach to the study. And even, we were talking this morning, even the souls that tended to be attracted to the study at first weren't incredibly well educated. It was what we call matajis, the old mothers who, you know, in that society really didn't get to pursue an education. The young Kumaris, again, just really not just starting their education. I think Daddy Janki maybe had 2-3 years of schooling. So he's surrounded by these souls, and he's so incredibly humble in his interaction, in his appreciation, his respect of these souls, this constant indication that he is focusing on step one. I'm not a businessman. I'm not this well-educated. I'm none of those things. I'm a soul. I'm a soul. I'm a soul. I'm a soul. He just was relentless and did not pass go until he had mastered that first lesson. And he knew it was always threatened by the inner resistance. So he's constantly revising, going back. You see this very rarely on the weight floor, going back to the basics over and over and over. Always protecting that foundation, never taking it for granted. Always knowing I have this first step is everything. I can't progress without mastering that first step and constantly taking care of it. And then we saw the quality of all the other steps. So we often say, follow in the footsteps of Brahma, in the sense that here is a soul who really understood progressions at a very deep level, even looking at what inspired the steps he was taking. It was never ego. It was always self-respect. And I want to even follow at that level. What inspires the steps I'm taking? Ego's always wanting to get in there, and I have to be really, really clear what's going on. So lots of honesty, lots of faith in the self, lots of clarity about my objective, lots of honesty and self-trust, never naive when it comes to the resistance, and just very humble, very humble. No problem. If everyone else seems to have progressed to the next step and I'm still sitting here on step one, not a problem. Not a problem. I refuse to disrespect myself and race through without mastering. I deserve the opportunity to master lesson one. I should give myself that chance to do it honestly. I didn't come into a spiritual study to try to prove anything to anyone. I'm here because I don't want to do that anymore. So really, so much humility, so much honesty makes it possible to move through progressions in a really successful way as they are designed. So I know we have to stop there. I'm going to see if there's any final thoughts anyone wants to share while I scramble over here and figure out what the next lesson is. So if there's any thoughts anyone wishes to share.
I was also thinking that another form the ego takes is you're supposed to, you know, like whether it's you're supposed to skip the progressions or you're supposed to do the progressions, but you're not really, your heart isn't really there, so you can't even take benefit from that either. Right.
Yeah. You know, we have this phrase of going through the motions because it's not meaningful. That's the beauty of progressions, is they also give us this kind of launch pads, a meaningfulness to what's going on versus just going through the motions. So I think it's nothing to be disturbed if boredom or lack of meaning, these types of, or just feeling off, if those set in, I can check. I think I need to go back and make sure I've got this piece in place, right? If any forms of dysfunctional feelings are coming in, they're very loyal feedback that I may need to check the steps that I'm taking. And there's no shame. You know, I remember once hearing someone, one of the progressions for a push-up is what we call a plank from the knees. And I'm sorry to say this, I don't know how else to say it. Very often in people's minds, the push-up from the knees is sometimes called a woman's push-up. So there's a stigma almost connected to it, especially if you're in a male body. Oh, I shouldn't be doing them for my knees. That's a woman. Like, it's a crazy, crazy attitudes. And I always find it so refreshing when a trainer says, or even demonstrates themselves, there's absolutely no shame. I have seen such frightening push-ups from the toes and absolutely meticulous push-up from the knees. And if I was given my choice, I don't want the frightening push-ups from the toes. It means nothing. It means nothing. If I understand the point of the exercise, I want it to be in a refreshing, in a rewarding, in a meaningful, and an accurate way. Otherwise, I'm taking no benefit. What am I proving? So yeah, these are all things that we have to check within ourselves. Our topic next weekend is, one of the best. So you can reflect on this. You probably already are using it all the time. And it is attention. Such a good topic. Attention. Brahma Baba was a master of paying attention. We're all really good at paying attention, by the way. It's just, what are we paying attention to? We love to pay attention to what's going on out there. So what am I paying attention to? We all have excellent. Some say, it's so hard to keep my attention. Oh, you have no problem. No one has any problem paying attention. Nobody. It's just what I'm paying attention to. Is it what I want to pay attention to? So let's take a moment to finish off with a reflection. Any kind of discipline, including the discipline of moving accurately and honestly through steps of progress, requires a lot of self-love and self-respect. It is so worth my time to cultivate internally an environment of self-respect before even embarking on a journey. I know the self-respect will be threatened as I move along. So I want to make sure that foundation is very, very powerful. It is never a waste of time to give the self time to cultivate that inner culture of self-respect and take time out to fortify and nourish it when needed. This will ensure every step I take towards my objective is meaningful, is honest, authentic, and powerful. What we call the real deal. Om Shanti.